Stay safe, everyone. Agencies will be stepping up enforcement at hotspots over Chinese New Year. Remember it raining all the time last year? It's official, 2021 was the second wettest year on record. Also for the record books, HDB resale prices climbing 12.7% last year, the most since 2010. You're watching The Big Story. I'm Olivia Quay. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. Enforcement agencies will be stepping up checks over Chinese New Year, in particular around Chinatown, at F&B outlets, shopping malls, supermarkets and parks. According to the Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment, safe distancing ambassadors and enforcement officers will be out and about during the festive period, including during peak hours, weekends and at hotspots. MSC urging people to enjoy the festivities safely to help Singapore ride through the Omicron wave. From data released today, last year was Singapore's second wettest year on record, second only to the rainfall in 2007. An island-wide average of 3,167.7 millimetres of rain, due in part to the La Nina climate phenomenon, which brings more rain over equatorial Southeast Asia. If you recall, August 2021 was unseasonably wet, leading to several incidents of flooding throughout the month, like what happened at the Pasir Ris Tampines Junction on August 20th, with one person taken to hospital and 5 more rescued by SCDF officers. A few days later, on the 24th, flash floods made a stretch of Dunyan Road between Sime Derby Centre and Binjai Park impassable. And the last instance from August the 30th, more flash floods in 2 areas, Hougang Avenue 8 and the Punggol Way slip road to the Tampines Expressway. Well, our science and environment correspondent explains why it's important for you and me to take note of these record rainfall figures.
The weather we experienced last year was mainly caused by a La Nina climate phenomenon. So this is a natural climate phenomenon that would occur regardless of how much emissions humans put into the atmosphere. But one thing it does offer us, it offers us a glimpse into what too much rain or periods of too much rain would be like. And climate scientists have already warned us that if the amount of human emissions being put into the atmosphere does not come down, one impact of that would be erratic rainfall patterns. And that would mean too much rain sometimes and not enough rain at other times. So a La Nina event and the extra rainfall that we have been receiving during this period is kind of an indication of what things could be like if humans don't stop putting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And while yes, humans can adapt by building deeper and larger drains, but considering that Singapore is already so land scarce, how deep and how wide would you want a drain to be? And would that encroach into other competing land users? So there's a lot of these things to consider, and not forgetting that erratic rainfall patterns are just one impact of climate change. There's also other issues like hotter temperatures, sea level rise. So impacts of climate change will not just be restricted to erratic rainfall patterns.
In other local news, Iris Koh, the founder of anti-vaccine group Healing the Divide, was admitted to Singapore General Hospital prior to her court hearing today. Her lawyer couldn't say since when or why she's in hospital. Today's hearing saw Koh's charge amended to a more serious one. She's now charged with conspiring with GP Gibson Kwa to make false representations to the Health Ministry, an offence punishable by up to 20 years jail, a fine or both. Her request for bail was denied and she'll be remanded upon her discharge. Following recent announcements of bus and train fare hikes, taking a taxi will start costing you more as well and could come as early as March. The Straits Times understands ComfortDelGro has signalled its intention to the authorities to adjust its flag down and distance rates. The planned adjustment is expected to be similar to its last one in 2011, when it raised the flag-down fare of most cabs by 20 cents and distance fares by 2 cents per fare band. And other taxi companies, Transcab, SMRT, Premier and Prime, will usually adjust their fares after the market leader. Unemployment rates are on track to hit pre-pandemic levels in the months ahead. According to the Manpower Ministry, improvements in the labour market will be driven by further easing of COVID-19 restrictions and the resumption of international travel. Overall, unemployment dropped to 2.6% in 2021 from 3% a year earlier. More official data out today, HDB resale prices surging 12.7% in 2021, the highest annual growth recorded since 2010. 259 flats sold for at least $1 million last year, the highest number on record. And despite the recent cooling measures, demand remains strong, with 24 resale units already changing hands for over $1 million as at January 28th. From February the 1st, it will be a year since Myanmar's military toppled the elected government and detained its leader Aung San Suu Kyi. 12 months on from the military takeover and violent crackdown that followed, the country remains in turmoil. Clashes are escalating between soldiers and newly formed People's Defence Forces, as well as some of the country's ethnic armed groups. There's no end in sight to the conflict. The violence has killed over 1,400 people so far and displaced at least 320,000. For Asian Insider this week, we're asking what's next for Myanmar. And joining us from Bangkok is our Indochina Bureau Chief, Tan Hui Yee. Hui Yee, since the military takeover in Myanmar, ASEAN has been fronting diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis. But what are the chances of a breakthrough anytime soon?
Well, it's unlikely we are going to see a breakthrough anytime soon. This is going to take time. The coup and what it triggered has aroused deep anger, and those resisting the military are not willing to consider compromise. And the military, on the other hand, is bent on subduing any opposition. There have been reports of incredible violence and cruelty. On Christmas Eve in Kaya State, for example, over 30 civilians were killed and burned. Now, ASEAN drew up its 5-point consensus to address Myanmar's crisis over 9 months ago. And since then, Myanmar's junta has pretty much ignored it. The violence has not stopped. The junta has not granted ASEAN's special envoy access to key political figures. And this includes State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, who has been detained since the coup. Given the junta's inaction, ASEAN members decided to limit Myanmar to a non-political representative at its meetings. That essentially shut out junta chief Min Aung Hlaing and his political appointees. Now, as a result, Myanmar was not represented in several summits last year. Now, Cambodia is ASEAN chair this year, and Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen has tried a different tack. He traveled to Myanmar this month to speak to General Min Aung Hlaing without setting any preconditions. Mr. Hun Sen has said he wants to draw from Cambodia's experience emerging from civil war to help bring peace to Myanmar. But it is still too early to say where this diplomacy will lead. And the junta has so far not given any indication that will honor the consensus.
Well, let's talk about the situation on the ground in Myanmar. You've just described, some instances of violence. So with fighting continuing, is there enough humanitarian assistance getting through to the people?
People are not getting enough aid. ASEAN managed to get some through to the Myanmar Red Cross last year. United Nations aid agencies and other groups are trying to reach the over 300,000 persons that have been displaced since the coup, but hundreds of thousands across the country are still without sufficient food, medicine, shelter, and clothing. And there's several reasons for this, right? There is not enough cash going around. The situation is volatile. The military appears to be delaying or denying permission for aid workers to travel to where they need. The soldiers are scrutinizing these supplies closely because they do not want them to go to the opposition. And there have been instances when they have confiscated or blocked supplies from reaching conflict zones. And conditions on the ground are very trying, Civilians have to flee when soldiers enter a town or village to avoid being taken as human shields. And when they flee, they leave most of their possessions behind. In areas where the junta is facing the fiercest resistance, soldiers are burning homes and destroying livestock and food supplies. So even when the fighting stops and they return home, people cannot resume their lives as normal. They have very little to survive on. So I was talking recently to a leader of a local community group, and she mentioned that organizing aid for these people on the run is not a straightforward affair. You may be able to give them things like blankets and tarpaulin sheets for shelter, but very often when they have to abandon these items the minute there is another raid and they need to run away, which means you have to keep giving them these same items over and over again. So what's clear from this is that Myanmar people need a lot more aid, and the aid has to go where it's most urgently needed.
And that was Indochina Bureau Chief Tan Hui Yee in Bangkok. Thank you so much, Hui Yee. For more on what the future holds for the people of Myanmar, Hui Yee's report is available online. There's also her story on the economy, which shrank an estimated 18% last year. Singapore President Halimah Yacob will be visiting China next week to attend the Beijing Winter Olympics opening ceremony. Madam Halimah will also have meetings with President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Keqiang, as well as attend a welcome banquet for foreign dignitaries. She'll be accompanied by Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan, Minister of State Yan Ling, and other officials. Well, this is Madam Halimah's first overseas working visit since the pandemic started. Moving on to more sports, with Novak Djokovic's vaccine exemption and visa controversy somewhat resolved, tennis players and fans could finally focus on 2 weeks of matches at the Australian Open. And here we are at the business end of the tournament, but the singles finals aren't quite set because the other men's finalist has yet to be confirmed. Stefanos Tsitsipas and Daniil Medvedev playing their semi-final at this moment. Who will meet Rafael Nadal in the final? The Spaniard, of course, vying for a record 21st major title. On the women's side, a showdown between Ashley Barty and Danielle Collins on Saturday evening. World number 1 Barty aiming to become the first home champion down under since 1978, but 30th ranked Collins showing that she belongs on the Grand Slam stage as well. Here for a finals preview is assistant sports editor Rohit Brijnath, who joins us from Melbourne. So Nadal has been tested by his opponents, by Denis Shapovalov, then by Matteo Berrettini earlier today. Well, as the other semi-final is still going on, Rohit, who poses a bigger threat to Nadal, Tsitsipas or Medvedev? And actually, do you ultimately think that it will be Nadal who will get that 21st Grand Slam come Sunday night?
Okay, many questions. I hope he gets it. It'll be really nice to see one of the old guys win again and for him to get his 21st. I think first thing is how does Nadal play? And I think the great thing is that he came out after his quarterfinal and came into the semi-final today and started really well, which is what he does often quite well and what he needs to do in the final, because he doesn't really want to have a long match. That's for sure. And he says his foot is still hurting, but it's Nadal. He manages the pain and he manages adversity and he keeps going. So he has a 3-1 record against Medvedev and a 7-2 record against Tsitsipas. Tsitsipas, the last time they played in the Australian Open, beat him in 5 sets after Nadal was 2 sets to love up. But I still think he'd rather play Tsitsipas because Tsitsipas, A, has got a single-handed backhand. And secondly, I think Medvedev has the ability to elongate points, which is something that Nadal doesn't want. He doesn't want to keep rallying from the baseline. And of course, Medvedev has a big serve, probably a little bit better serve than Tsitsipas. But if you ask me, I think that he would probably like to play Tsitsipas a little bit more than he'd like to play Medvedev. I think what he'll be really hoping for is a very long second semi-final.
Well, moving on to tomorrow's women's final between Ashley Barty and Danielle Collins. Collins, definitely the surprise finalist here after she upset 7th seed Iga Swiatek. But Rohit, how much of a shot does she have against the top-ranked Barty, who will no doubt also have the home crowd behind her?
I think actually this could be it could be a really fascinating and fantastic match, because I think really what you want in tennis is contrast, which is what basically Federer and Nadal gave us. And I think you're going to find that here, because Collins is a really big hitting player. And Bharti, of course, can do everything. You know, she has that slice, and that slice, I think, of Bharti is going to be the key to the final. Because players often find it very difficult to play because it slows down the game. There's no pace on it. They have to generate their own pace and also control it and hit it deep. So it's not easy, right? The other thing Bharti does very well, of course, is that she serves very well. For a woman who's not very tall, I think she has the second highest aces in the tournament. But I think what is really interesting is that Collins, so Bharti has a 3-1 record against Collins, but Collins beat her the last time they met. And the other thing is, in 2 of the other matches where Bharti beat Collins, it went to 3 sets. So obviously, she doesn't mind playing Bharti. So that's really interesting. But I think 2 other things. One is, Bharti is going to have some pressure on her, obviously, because no Australian woman has won the Australian Open since, I think, 1978. So that's there. And she is the prohibitive favorite. And then, of course, for Collins, you have that whole thing of nothing to lose. But of course, she's in a first final. Bharti's already won Wimbledon and the French Open. Collins has never been to a final. That's bound to make her a little bit nervous. So I think that is going to be quite crucial in how they basically process their nerves in the early part of the match. I still think that Bharti has to be the favorite because she's just playing extremely well. And I think because she won Wimbledon last year, I think she's very comfortable in her skin. I think there's a certain aura about her. I think people realize often women's tennis, you're not really sure who is the best player in the world. Now it's very clear she is the best player in the world. But of course, she has to prove it tomorrow.
Fantastic insights from Rohit Brijnath, their assistant sports editor. Visit straitstimes.com for more news and our YouTube channel for more videos. Subscribe by hitting the red button below. I'm Olivia Quay. See you soon on The Big Story.